All right, teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one show on innovative teamwork. And it's like that for a reason. I'm going to get into it in just a few seconds. Let me just bring in my regular listeners because you regular listeners already know it's about Mr. ABC. Always be connecting, whatever your challenge is, whatever your obstacle is, whatever it is you may be going through in life. We're here to indirectly tell you you are not going through it alone. And I got to tell you guys, there's no more excuses. All right. There's no more excuses. One of the things that happened to me throughout this election cycle is I started to be a lot more vocal with certain wrongdoings. I started to be a lot more vocal about particularly Black people not having this victim mentality and walking around more so like victors, not being someone that's always playing the race card and using the excuse. And I'm recording this. It is a day after the news has broke. I believe is it Brandon Neely is his name? Make sure.
Jordan Neely.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Jordan Neely. So there was a Brandon Neely on the show. But yeah, I'll be 100% honest with you. I wasn't even aware of this story until yesterday with Jordan Neely and I believe it's Dave Portney. And it came out that he's not going to be charged for these crimes that he was accused for and all that kind of stuff. So as I was hearing the blowback and hearing a lot of the stuff that was being said, and this is the first time he's hearing this, so this is all organic, folks. I specifically looked up because I heard Jordan Neely's dad. I heard him complain and kind of pulling the race card. I specifically looked up, well, where was his dad before he became homeless? Where was his dad during these times? And guess whose article pops up on the New York Times? Mr. Adam Coleman. So welcome to the show. I read his article, I posted it, and I said, look, man, I have a platform. I'd love to have you on to really chat about this because the work you're doing, Black Man to Black Man is incredibly inspiring, man. So all that being said, welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's important that I document. I want to give you guys that backstory because you just never know who's listening. You never know whose heart you're touching. You never know the people that are actually going to be drawn to your work based on their mindset, regardless of how things may be going for you in the moment. And I did a little research on you before we started recording, and you were actually in the IT space. You were never in the thought leadership space at all. You were never someone that is now, getting paid off his intellectual property. So take us back there a little bit, walk us through your background and, some of the things that you actually had to see that made it so, hey, I can't stay quiet about this because it's so damn important to me.
Yeah. I mean, people who know me know I'm a relatively quiet person.
Hmm.
Kind of an introvert. I say I'm an introvert who does some extrovert things.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, my prior life, um, I was an IT guy.
Hmm.
I like computers and stuff like that. I've always had an interest in it. Decided to get into it. I just turned 40. So, I really dove into it in my mid 20s, uh, getting into the field. So maybe about close to 15 years or so,
Hmm.
being in IT and different levels. At the I made it to a point where I was IT manager for a small business, which is basically like you're a one man shop. You do everything. Um,
Now, this is all in New York,
New Jersey.
Jersey. Okay.
Yep. Um, so I mean, there's several aspects to my story. I won't go into everything because it would just be too long.
All
But
right.
I would say in 2019, I I met someone who it was a friend of mine now, but I met him randomly in a pub in Madrid.
Hmm.
He was a turns out he was an English conservative,
Hmm.
and we started exploring different ideas, and he introduced me to different things.
Hmm.
And I had a lot of good faith in him. And there was a point we would talk almost every day, and we would binge audiobooks and listen to like libertarian philosophy and conservatives and all different types of people.
Right.
And part of the reason why I was open to it was because I started to become a bit and I just want to make sure
Yeah, you
you
said a bit something and that part got missed.
oh okay. Um I just want to make sure I don't have an issue with my
Yeah,
audio. Hold on one second.
yeah, go ahead, you're fine.
That was a little bit weird because I saw something pop up on the screen. So
It's
hopefully I'm
like you're
not.
talking to an IT guy when he's making sure everything is straight.
Um, so yeah, I met him. We got into all this type of political philosophy and stuff like that. For basically as long as I was interested in politics, I was a Democrat.
Hmm.
Um, I would call it like a default Democrat, but just kind of dove into it. But I realized that I was getting um, right-wing understanding from a left-wing filter.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to understand things better. And actually, when I kind of defected away from just being a Democrat, just because I started listening to progressives. I'm on the left, let me listen to progressives.
Hmm.
For months, I listened to progressives. I watched progressive content. I
Hmm.
understood why progressives say what they say and
Right.
what they mean. And then I listened to conservatives, and then I listened to libertarians. So I listened to just about everybody,
Hmm.
and in a matter of less than a year to kind of understand what makes the most sense.
Hmm.
Um, and everybody isn't right about everything.
Right.
Um, some are more right than others.
Hmm.
Um, but to fast forward, 2020 happens. You may be aware of George Floyd.
Right.
And
Summer. Well, I have a partner. He calls it the summer of social justice. Actually, that was so the reason I put out my second book, Make Your Move, I it was because of that. Because again, my name as Juan, it means black. It's Arabic for
Hmm,
black. So when you start putting out this term, Black Lives Matter, and the sham that it became and all the stuff that was going on, it was touching me in a completely different way. So I'll let you continue, but I'll just say
yeah.
so much of what you said is how I felt to where default Democrat because '08 was the first time I ever voted. I was 18 in '08, so Obama was default Democrat. It looked like me, funny name. So I was loyal
Mhm.
without doing the research. And then the minute you start doing the research and asking these questions, your antennas really go up to wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make
Right.
sense for men to be playing in women's sports. And me being a sports guy, I was like, absolutely not. That was the I can't do this with y'all. So anyway, go ahead before I get on my tangent.
No, yeah, I would say with with COVID happening,
Mhm.
the lockdowns happening, and I was always inquisitive, just like asking certain questions. And then George Floyd happening, and all of a sudden it was like overnight, all these new narratives popped up, and it was like, well, yeah, this is how it's always been. And I'm like, no, it hasn't. Who said this is how things are? And even for me, I was coming from a left-wing perspective. It's
Yeah.
like, when did we start telling people they're not allowed to speak? I thought being a liberal was pro-free speech. Like
Mhm.
all these different liberal values were just disappearing one after the other. At first, I thought it was just me, and then
Mhm.
I went on these different one particular website. There was a free speech platform,
Mhm.
and I was just reading and seeing like, am I going crazy or is the world going crazy? Am I the only one?
Right.
And I found out I wasn't the only one, and I decided to express myself on this platform. And
Mhm.
then people kept saying, you should keep writing. Like the
Mhm.
way you express yourself was really good.
Mhm.
Um, a small rewind, I would say sometime in 2019, after like all of these epiphanies, I thought about writing a book, but I had zero idea what to write about. Like the only thing I could think of was like questioning things, but I had no idea.
Mhm.
I think I sat down for like 20 minutes one day and that was it.
Right.
Um, but after getting this encouragement from these essentially strangers, and actually, funny enough, one of them was a Baptist preacher
Mhm.
who had reached out to me and encouraged me to keep writing. And I was like, maybe this is the book. Maybe this is the book I'm supposed to be writing.
Right.
Um, so, I wrote Black Victim and Black Victor. Um, it took me about 9 months,
Mhm.
start to finish. Self-published it, and I was just like, let me just see if anybody cares what I think.
Right.
I had zero expectations. I just thought maybe some friends of mine and some 10 people here might buy the book.
Mhm.
And I just had like a small strategy of just reaching out to podcasts and see where it takes me. And um, that's why I'm incredibly happy where it's brought me because I had zero expectations of any of this happening.
Right.
I've been writing for the New York Post, I want to say about 2 years now,
Mhm.
um, almost weekly. And, that is relatively unheard of.
Right.
When not just the opinion editor, but when the top editor has actually this Jordan Neely situation is a perfect example.
Mhm.
I was just sitting there writing something else, and they reached out to me and said, "Hey, can you write a piece?"
Mhm.
So it's gone from me pitching to them reaching out
Right.
to get me involved. They did something a couple weeks ago um, for Jesse Smollett, in his
Right. I read that
situation.
one. I read that one.
So that's the same thing. They reached out to me, asked me if I could write something real quick.
Mhm.
So to be in this position, and I love writing for the New York Post,
Yes.
to be in this position to write for the oldest paper in America, and I'm just the IT guy, with an opinion, but
Mhm.
I'm someone who I feel is authentic. I don't try to be like anybody else. I just try to write how I feel and be honest,
Right.
and sometimes be critical, but not malicious.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think that's my general approach, and I just keep writing and forming my craft because I'm not a writer by trade. I didn't go to school for writing or anything like that.
Right.
I just know how to communicate with people working in IT.
Right.
Um, so initially I started writing like I talk, and then from there you just kind of work on different areas of the craft. And for me now it's second nature.
Yes, and what he's laying out too for you listeners as well is the importance of writing in general. All right, it's not something that you necessarily have to go to school for to become a great writer, but it is a form of communication, even if you're planning on only yourself reading it. All right, because I too actually write articles on a weekly basis. Well, now that I got ChatGPT, there's like 4 or 5 articles coming out a week now that I've been able to help to have that help me edit some of my thoughts and all that. But I want to kind of go back to a little bit of your political views and how you were able to establish yourself in this world, because I wrote an
Mhm.
article, actually it was around the time of it, maybe a month ago now. I titled it "Why the Two-Party System Sucks," and I kind of laid out a lot of the things that you have laid out, to where on one side we could look at identity and we could kind of force ourselves to be on one side, but if we're not paying attention, all of a sudden you'll start to realize how poison you're actually being if you allow these things to happen. And when it comes to some of the pushback I've gotten, like I've actually lost it, I've lost friends. I mean, there's people that I no longer communicate with over politics, over this election. So many things have happened, and I'm curious now, when you were transitioning, you kind of becoming known for what you're being known now for, how
Mhm.
was that process like? Or was there a process to where there's certain people that started to reveal themselves as they were maybe getting too critical of your work, or they weren't agreeing with it? They couldn't even have the open-mindedness to just say, hey, that's his views, I have my views, and be good with it. They had to take it on they had to extend it. How have those conversations or those challenges been for you?
um Overall very positive, to be
Mhm.
honest with you. There were I would say 3 or 4 uh progressive friends
Mhm.
um, who who basically dropped off at different points.
Yes.
Um, the last one was trying to hang on, but it was in bad faith.
Hmm.
Um, and so we just haven't tried to call each other since.
Right.
Um, and he would call himself a self-proclaimed socialist. So, um, but I'm one of those people where I can be friends with just about anybody
Right.
outside of politics. Like I don't your political philosophy doesn't matter all that much because you don't have that much power. You get one vote just like me. So, okay, you want to overthrow the system? Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Right,
how's your family doing? Like
right, right.
so it's for me personally, I'm not married to I can only be friends with people who think like me.
Hmm.
I think that's kind of boring.
Yes.
Um, and on top of that, I can be friends with people in the absence of talking about politics. And I would actually prefer that
Yeah.
more often than not. The only people I talk to about politics consistently, I met them through politics.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I don't need to talk to you about politics.
Mhm.
But as far as like friends and family,
Right.
um, I've been very blessed. There's only one family member, and this is before I even dove into writing. It was like it was like a Facebook post I made
Right.
with just statistics. It was like this long thought out thing about statistics.
Mhm.
Um, and it turned into, them wanting me to talk to me on the phone, and then
Mhm.
it turned into this argument. But they apologized the next day, but we haven't talked since.
Right.
Um, because they were implying certain things,
Right.
which were ridiculous. But outside of that, um, my family loves me. They support me. Uh, I think many of them don't understand what my political beliefs are
Right.
because they don't ask me.
Mhm.
They might assume, but I think for a lot of people, not just my family, but I think a lot of people don't understand that it's very possible to think that both sides are wrong and sometimes both sides are right. Um, and that depending on what the policy is, I
Mhm.
have a certain flavor of what I think that policy should be.
Right.
Um, and that I didn't write my book to say that racism doesn't exist because that's stupid. I'm talking about something very particular.
Right.
Um, and so like people are used to superficial political discussion
Mhm.
and lacking nuance.
Right.
Um, or lacking understanding that I'm an independent.
Mhm.
Today, I've mostly Republicans who follow me and people who are right-leaning conservatives. But
Mhm.
I've never gone around saying I'm a black conservative.
Mhm.
I don't have that in my title or anything. The most I ever titled myself as an independent.
Yeah.
And it's because I want the freedom to criticize.
Mhm.
And I don't want to be pigeonholed into one particular thing or not.
Right.
I supported Ron DeSantis. I wrote it in the New York Post. The DeSantis camp invited me out to his inauguration and reelection event, which
Mhm.
was awesome.
Well, I'm
Um,
here in Florida too, so man, you got to hit me up if you're ever out here.
oh, there you go.
I'm in Palm Beach. Yeah.
uh,
I'm in Palm Beach, so you
oh,
get to
Palm Beach, yeah,
I'm in Florida. Florida.
yeah. I've been to Florida a few times over the past year and a half.
Mhm.
Um, but but when he was no longer a nominee, like I was like, well, let me think about it. And for some time, I wasn't even sure if I was going to vote because I wasn't fully sold on Trump. And then it came to a point where I was like, all right, you know what? I think this is the best of the options. And I could see his demeanor change. I could see his seriousness change. And so I decided to vote for Trump for the first time.
Mhm.
But this was me consciously thinking, I got into phone conversations with friends who are Trump supporters,
Mhm.
and they're like, you can't just not vote. Like, I'm like, I don't know.
Right. Right. Right.
So, it's that kind of thing. To summarize, I
Yeah.
just I want to think about it because for so many years, I just did it.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about the counter narrative. Like I took the information that I received, I deciphered it, but it doesn't help when you don't get the entirety of a viewpoint. You just
Mhm.
get one viewpoint and dissect it and think you're knowledgeable about it. But I need to hear everything.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where I'm more in pursuit of.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up because one of the things that made me want to reach out to you when I saw the work you're doing is you were recently baptized. And
Yeah.
I say this all the time as a person that has restarted going to church every single Sunday this past summer. I made a commitment to be there every Sunday. I actually became a group leader at my churches. I say it, I mean, to the people that are open, to the people that, like, I'll give you an example. The other day I got my hair cut and there was the barber was like, Trump's an idiot. And before I was about to go back and forth with him, he eventually said, look, I'm governed by God. Yeah, I'm governed by God. And he and I had a conversation and understanding, regardless of who's in office, God is going to be who directs my steps. I'm going to just go with what's truthful. So I
Hmm.
give you the platform a little bit to talk about how you were drawn to that more so and how you're able to now walk around with this clarity to say, hey, I'm going to be an independent thinker and God is going to be the ultimate person that governs me.
Well, so just to let you know, I'm working on my second book.
Mhm.
Um, should be out in the spring. But I do have a chapter talking about my testimony because it's a long journey. Coming from, a child who was abandoned by his father and not believing that his heavenly father is the same as his earthly father,
Mhm.
and struggling to understand God or if God exists, accepting being agnostic in my 20s leading into my 30s, and then having an supernatural evil experience and a supernatural um, good experience.
Mhm.
And um, it sounds weird, but there was a clairvoyant girlfriend that I had, um, who said some stuff to me, which I talk about in the chapter. And
Don't want to give too much away. Go get the book, guys. Go get the
yeah,
book. It'll be out by then. Go get the book.
yeah.
Just let me know when it gets on
Uh,
pre-order too, man. I'll have to support that.
Thank you. Yeah, but just like all of these, because it was a lot of different steps.
Hmm.
Part of my journey was overcoming my social anxiety.
Hmm.
I started solo traveling, which initially wasn't supposed to be a solo travel. It was supposed to be traveling with a friend,
Hmm.
but he ended up not being able to go. But I went, and I realized afterwards um, how I started trusting myself. I started listening to myself. So there's nothing to be anxious about because every time I listened to myself, things worked out. And not being fearful of that voice that's inside of me. And
Yeah.
then asking, well, what is that voice exactly? I was like, well, where should I go? Who should I listen to? Should I watch out for this person? Should I stay from this person? And every time I listened to that voice, it worked out. And since then, every time I go against my instincts, it doesn't work out. You
Yeah.
know, I've had that with people who are like online friends
Hmm.
who all of a sudden act funny. And I'm like, I think this is going to end up badly.
Hmm.
And then
And
give
I
it a
say
week and
it so
they're gone.
often, like, nowadays when you have the technology the way it is, the one thing that people are starving for is authenticity. They want authentic conversation, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person. When you
Mhm.
have the options, you have so many fake people out there, Adam. I mean, you know it probably just as well as I do. There's so many
Yeah.
people out there that are going to say one thing and do a completely different thing. They're going to go online, they tough online, you see them in person. It's a completely different world. So I think, as we get older, it's a matter of folks are really trying to figure out who's authentic, who's actually
Yeah.
doing stuff that they believe in. And regardless if I believe it or not, I'm just happy to meet people that are actually authentic with their word and they stay on their word and they just have some morals, man.
Yeah, absolutely. You can speak to my wife if you were to ever meet her, and she'll tell you that I'm incredibly consistent.
Exactly.
Um, Not just when it comes to philosophy or how I think, but just how I behave and how I treat people.
Mhm.
I believe I should treat people like I want to be treated.
Right.
And I do that pretty well. I have a hard time faking my emotions and pretending to be someone else. They're like, oh, just do it and you'll like it, or just show that you like. I can't put on a face where I like something and I don't like. Just simple stuff like that. It's something that I have to be true to myself. And when I do something that is opposed to that, I feel horrible. Um, I used to think having a conscience was kind of a curse because you see my
It can
friends.
feel like that. Yeah, it can feel like that when you're around the wrong crowd. It can genuinely feel like
Yeah,
that. Doing things
yep,
that's not popular.
right. Like, when I was younger, I was, into women and like, oh no, man, just do this. Oh, don't care about them. Yeah, yeah. And I was like, but I feel like that's wrong.
Yeah. And the
Like,
thing is, too, everybody does, but we really ignore the voice in our head because
mhm,
it goes with, the immediate acceptance. And, one of the things that really, in addition to the work you're doing in church and the kind of how you've been able to understand God as the center of your life. I'm a
yeah.
sports guy, so you know me. I have to ask you. I have to talk to you about this sports apparel brand that you're pushing, man. It didn't hit me until I went in there and I looked at them like X, Y. We got a clothing line. You're talking about the chromosomes, X and Y chromosomes, and
Yeah.
you have a partnership with them. So I want to give you. I know because I want to be respectful of your time. I'm going to give you the opportunity to speak a little bit about how that partnership came about, how people can support it, how they can get involved with some of that. So, just to some clarity, folks, it's XY chromosomes to kind of support the fact that people who are born women, need to be playing women's sports, and the people who are born men need to be playing men's sports. All right, that's one of the things that I was huge on this past election, and you have a brand that speaks to that.
Yeah, it was started by Jennifer Say. Jennifer used to be an executive with Levi Strauss,
Mhm.
um, and was basically forced out when she was against the lockdowns, and she was vocal about it. And she decided to start her own brand.
The lockdown
Um,
for COVID.
yep,
Oh. Hmm.
yep. And she decided to start her own brand and with a message, but with quality products. Like sometimes you see stuff it's gimmicky and you just get it because to make a point, but you wouldn't buy it again. The very first time I put on a shirt, I was like, this is nice.
Right,
Like
right.
every product, even the I have a water bottle.
Yeah.
Even the water bottle is nice. Like every product is legit nice. It's well made. And she knows what she's doing, coming
Right.
from a major corporation like that. So she knows
Mhm.
sourced, um, she sourced, a good designer, a team that believes in what she's trying to do.
Right.
Um, and I'm incredibly proud to be associated with them. How we got together was purely by uh, accident. Like I was joking because I had lost a bunch of weight. Um, I think at the time I was down 60 or so pounds.
Right.
Um, and she was like, "Oh," she was saying on Twitter, "Should I start a athletic brand?" And I was like, "Hey, if you need a model, let me know."
Oh, no kidding. So
Yeah,
she just put out a tweet and you responded to a tweet.
yeah. I just responded to a tweet, and then 2 seconds later, she sends me a DM. She's like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "I'm serious if you're serious." And then the next day, she sends me a contract, and a few months later, I'm flying out to Nashville to do a photo shoot. So,
There you go.
yeah,
Hey man, I said that to start the show. I'm gonna re-emphasize, I'm gonna reinforce it. You don't got no excuses, guys. If you are serious, and I know the kind of people that regularly tune into this show, if you're serious about success and you're listening to us talk right now, you have no excuse to not go after your goal and consistently put your stuff out there because you just don't know where it's gonna land. You don't know who it's gonna land with and what kind of opportunities they can create for you. So and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you shed this 60 pounds not knowing that now there's going to be an endorsement deal that comes with it. You just simply happen to respond to a tweet. Now you're being flown out to Nashville, and that's just more eyeballs on your stuff, more opportunities for you to connect. And here you are, this introvert IT guy. You're like, wow, what
yeah.
actually happened? So, like I said, I do want to be very respectful of your time. Can you just tell people, you mentioned your other book, just tell people a little bit about what's next, what they can expect coming down the pipeline, and all that good
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, and don't worry about the time.
Yeah.
I haven't said the title of the book publicly yet. I'm still waiting. Um, but what the book is about is childhood abandonment and family separation. Um, and I would say the thesis of the book is that the major issues that we see in our country, whether it be drug addiction, homelessness, um,
Hmm.
sexual exploitation, all of these different things, they all have a root. Like, where does it all start? And coincidentally, when the New York Post reached out to me about writing about Jordan Neely, I was working on that a particular chapter,
Mhm.
talking in kind of visually illustrating someone who is homeless and on drugs,
Mm.
and where do they come from, right?
Mhm.
And here, boom, Jordan Neely story drops into my lap,
Same here.
and an hour later, I'm basically writing what I was writing before.
Mm.
Um, and his story is much of that. It's a perfect example. His mother was murdered when he was 14. He ultimately ended up in the foster care system, and we all know, we all have like a sliver of an idea of what happens to kids in foster care. Um, bouncing around from home to home, was abused,
Mhm.
neglected, abandoned, and then aged out of the foster care system, ended up on the streets and was homeless since,
Right.
and died at the age of 30. Whether you agree with how, the chokehold or not, he
Right.
ultimately had a tragic death, a tragic life. And it all started from, I would say it probably started before that because he was in an abusive household with his stepfather.
Right.
Um, Obviously, you don't kill your wife after the first argument. This is something that was going on over and over. And he actually testified at his trial, and he testified to that every day they were fighting. So every day it was uncertainty for him.
Mhm.
Um, his mother was being beaten up in front of him. He saw this, and ultimately resulting in his mother being killed.
Mhm.
Um, so his story is tragic, and so we always see the end result, right? The end result is this belligerent guy, um, who essentially is crying out for help because some of his final words were, "I don't care if I die, and I don't care if I go to jail," which is, these are tragic quotes,
Mhm.
um, of someone who has lost all hope and no longer cares about their life. Their life is meaningless. What
Mhm.
we call freedom, not being incarcerated, doesn't even matter to him because they're equally the same. Whether he lives, he dies, he's free or incarcerated, doesn't matter to him.
Mhm.
And that's the end result of being abandoned and constantly being disappointed as a child and
Mhm.
being abused, right? His foster brother talks about this. He gave an interview. His foster brother talked about, they were abused. Part of the reason why he was dancing on the streets was because they were being abused. And he was kind of implying that they were using the money to eat. And it sounds like he was in a foster home. I'm speculating, just so to make it clear. It sounds like he was in a foster home that wasn't that was taking the money from the state or from
Mhm.
the city, but wasn't using it on the boys.
Okay.
So they weren't feeding them, they weren't providing for them. So he felt he needed to go and dance on the street to get money so he could eat. That's a tragic situation. No child should actually go through that.
Mhm.
But and then what ends up happening is you see these political opportunists share his dancing video. Oh, look at his joy for dancing. No, he was dancing because he was hungry. He was dancing because that's the only way he knew how to make money.
It,
And
yeah, go ahead, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
yeah, so my the Neely situation is an example of that. He was let down, constantly let down. And his story is not alone. For every crazy homeless man that you see in the subway, for every guy who is hunched over in Kensington, Philadelphia, for every person who's down and out in San Francisco, they all have an origin story.
Yeah.
And I would bet 9 times out of 10, most of them came from some sort of broken home.
Mhm.
Um, and for many of them, and there's not enough focus on this. For
Mhm.
many of them, they're very similar to Jordan Neely, where they age out of the foster care system and they're left to fend for themselves.
Mhm.
I will have a chapter talking about the foster care system. I interviewed someone I know who was part of who was in the foster care system and later became a foster parent. So she has both sides of the spectrum. But for her, she said one of the biggest hurdles about being a foster child is that you don't really learn any life skills. Like every day is a survival. And so every day is also uncertain. And so no one's investing their time to teach you how to do this because tomorrow you may get moved to another home,
Mhm.
right? So it's a very chaotic situation that would drive any kid crazy, that would make any kid feel hopeless, and not care about themselves, not care about society. And it's no wonder that someone turns to drugs to drown it out because their life is painful. So I want people to have, yes, he was threatening, and I get all that.
Mhm.
But the man didn't wake up that day out
Right.
of nowhere, right? He was groomed by abandonment. He was groomed by constant disappointment. Um, and and so what I'm trying to do within this book is examine this phenomenon of childhood abandonment. Nearly a quarter of children grow up in separate homes from their parents.
Right.
I'm one of those kids, growing up without my father and how it impacted me. Now, I didn't end up on the streets, but we were homeless twice when I was a kid, and I was homeless for a few months as an adult. And so I understand what it's like. I wasn't on the streets, but I had no place to go. I understand what it's like to struggle. I understand what it's like to think, I should just kill myself. I
Mhm.
understand what it's like to go through suicide ideation, to not believe in yourself, to be desperate. I get all that.
Mhm.
And what ends up happening is they see Adam Coleman writing for the New York Post and look at all the successes, but they don't know what I went through. They don't know that at the age of 8, I
Mhm.
was put into a mental hospital because I wanted to kill myself.
Mhm.
Like, this was a real situation. I just happened to survive it. Jordan Neely didn't. So this is a much bigger problem. And the last thing I'll say is I have conversations with people that I meet all the time, and I tell them I'm working on this book, and I tell them what I'm working on. Every one of them has a story. Every
Right.
one of them says, "Oh, I know someone who's going through that. My cousin's going through that. My friend's going through that." Everyone has a story. I've never met anyone where I describe what I'm writing about that they did not know someone who is currently a child who's going through that or was a child who went through that. It
Mhm.
is a massive problem that we think isn't that big,
Right.
but there's a reason why these things are happening. So I'm not one to run to the government to fix the government is the band-aid,
Mhm.
but we need to look at the root. What is the root? And the root is that the parents are letting their children down. The parents are responsible for the outcomes of their children.
Mhm.
If my son, just like I wrote in that paper, if my son became a neighborhood terrorist, I would feel embarrassed
Mhm.
because I let my son down and I didn't raise him right. That's a level of accountability that every parent should have, and most parents don't. It is, they're a bad kid. No, you're a bad parent who created a bad child,
Right.
right? Every time I see a bad kid, I look at their parents, and they could be well intentioned, but they enable their children. They didn't discipline them. And now you have a terrible child
Right.
who doesn't mind breaking into your house because they don't care. You never taught them to care. There was no repercussions.
Right.
And not having that discipline tells a child that no one cares enough to tell them otherwise.
Mhm.
And so there are a lot of different things that I'm covering within the book. Many of them are taboo. Many of them are very personal to me. But these are things that are necessary. So the last thing I'll try to shape as far as what the book will be
Mhm.
when it's out, it will be a very unique. It will be personal and child-centered. Like, I'm giving the perspective of the child, not just of the parent or as the adult, but the perspective of the child. Um, and while also being critical of our culture. So it's culture critical, child-centered, and very personal.
Well, first of all, God bless you. I appreciate you more than you possibly know, seeing that I teach. I've spent time being homeless as well. Lived out of a car for, everything you shared hits a different kind of chord. But when you talk about young people, I was homeless by choice. I just don't like didn't want to pay rent and all that. But when you talk about kids having kids going through that and not having control over that, I thank God every day that my parents, I had a two-parent household that structured a lot of discipline in me, and I see every single day how much I owe them for giving me that, regardless of how much I may have disagreed with certain things that they did. So I appreciate you reinforcing that from my perspective and me teaching and being around these kids every single day. Pretty much all of them coming from broken homes. Uh,
Yeah.
the next point I have to make too for the people that weren't jurors in this whole situation that are giving their opinion, you got to stop it. All right. The people where I spent time being in the jury and jury duty, they had the information, they made the decision, and you got to simply accept what the situation was and stop looking for political gain and stop looking to profit off something that hurts us. I mean, it's something that we actually lived through, and then you're trying to profit from it from your own selfish needs. So
Right.
all that being said, I did subscribe to your stuff. I'm going to be like reading all your articles now because now you really got this up. But could you just tell people a little bit about where they can get more of your work, where they can get in touch with you and reach out to you if they're interested in hearing more?
Yeah, I have basically everything that I'm working on Substack, adambcoleman.substack.com. Um, I also have a web series called Breaking Bread. It's in person only. I sit down and have conversations with people from different backgrounds about different things. Just talk about life. It's I don't want to say unscripted, because that doesn't mean anything these days. But like, I just don't plan anything, and I just sit down and we have a meal together, and we just
So
talk.
I saw one of those. All right. So, Adam, the way I close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. The 8-year-old version of you has just come into the Zoom room. He
Mhm.
struggling obviously with a lot of the things that he's going through. I want you to pretend that he's here, give him some words of encouragement, and we will officially close.
Um, I will tell him that he is not alone. I think that was my biggest struggle when I was 8, is thinking that I was alone in this. Um, God, God is there, and God has always been there. Um, and to not give up hope. I think those are the things that I struggled with, believing that I was alone and kind of being hopeless. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing that you say that because shout out to Pastor Grow Show, but he's talking about, how the one consistent is God is going to be there regardless. That does not mean he's going to solve your problems, but he's simply there. And in many times, as you guys heard today, sometimes it just takes you being there can make all the difference in the world. So all that being said, man, appreciate you, brother. Keep doing the work you're doing. Everyone out there, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.